So remember back in the fall when I was like, I'm gonna knit Frog and Toad for Ronan, and I was very romantic about it? Yeah, we need to talk, because I learned something important about myself as a knitter, and it's this. I'm not emotionally strong enough to knit steeked eyeballs that are smaller than a Cheerio. Hi, my name is Taylor, and today I want to give you a real update on my Frog and Toad project that I mentioned months ago. Because I know some of you have been wondering if it's happening, if it's done, if it's on a shelf somewhere, living its best life. And the honest answer is no. This is not a pattern review from the mountaintop. This is a pattern review from the ditch. We learn things, we move on, we keep our peace. Okay, so this all started back in fall. I wanted to knit Frog and Toad for my youngest son, Ronan, because he had recently started reading the books in his second grade class. And in my head, it was going to be this sweet, nostalgic storybook thing. Like I was picturing a child who lovingly clutches a handmade Frog and Toad and cherishes them forever, which is a beautiful idea. It's also a fantasy novel I wrote in my head, because what I didn't fully account for at the time is that Ronan is Ronan. And as the project went on, I started noticing that he wasn't really interested. Not in like a rude way, just in this lack of interest, even though he knew what I was making kind of way. I didn't even tell him initially that it was for him, but he kind of started to realize what it was, because he would catch me using my pattern. It was just really hard to keep this concealed. And I was okay with that. I really was. If he knew that this is what I was making, he would have been happier knowing it was for me alone. And that's when it hit me that I may have been projecting my own romanticized idea of all of this onto Ronan. Because here's the truth, I would not knit Frog and Toad for myself. I would not. They're adorable, they're charming, they're iconic, but I'm not the kind of person who wants a little frog and toad sitting on my shelf like tiny little museum artifacts. So going into this, the only fuel I had for this whole project was the fact that I was convinced Ronan would love it. And then it became clear that Ronan just probably wouldn't. But it started strong. As you know, if you've been around since I started this, it did start strong, and I started with Frog. This is Frog. And at first I actually enjoyed it. It was kind of fun seeing this little creature come together. It's small, but I don't mind small knitting to an extent. Sometimes small is a nice change of pace, and when I spoke about this, I said as much. And it was moving along. The body was happening. Shape is happening. It's cute. I'm like, okay, we're in business. And then I got to the legs. I had this moment with the legs where I was convinced I had made a mistake. I talk all about this on a previous episode. You know that feeling where you look at something that looks weird in your knitting and your brain immediately goes to that, wait, we've ruined the whole thing place? That was me with the legs. So I ripped one of the legs back and reknit it, only to discover that what I thought was a mistake initially really was just the way it was supposed to look. And that was my first foreshadowing moment of, this is not a pattern you can judge by vibes. This is a pattern where you have to trust the process. And I do trust the process, but I have to trust it from a safe emotional distance. But then I got to the part where you have to mark the eye sockets, and then you cut into the frog's face so that you can then pick up stitches around that cut, and then you cast on new stitches, all in the space of what is essentially a 1/4 inch square, maybe even less. And that is when I realized, oh, this isn't a knitting project, this is miniature surgery. This is the kind of thing that you do at a table, not on the couch, not in an armchair, not cozy in your knitting space. This is the kind of thing you do with one of those magnifying ring lights and absolute silence. This is the kind of thing that you do with that whole hyper-focused energy of the guy from Toy Story 2 who repaints Woody. Or like the keymaker from The Matrix. Like, you need tiny tools and perfect lighting and the emotional stability to handle proceeding with the plan while doing micro precision work. That is not my knitting vibe. And again, I'm not even mad about it, it's just data. I learned in real time what kind of knitter I am and what kind of knitter I am not. And I am not the kind of knitter who wants to steek eye holes that are smaller than a pea. Like, just like, look. Look at that. Nope. It wasn't just, oh, this is fiddly. It was anxiety. Like it was dread. Because once you cut into the fabric, there's no uncutting it. And yes, I know you can fix things. You can reinforce, you can do the whole dance. I know this. But I don't knit to feel like I'm diffusing a bomb. I knit because I want to relax. I want rhythm. I want flow in a slice of my day where I feel like those things are otherwise hard to come by. And there's nothing wrong with challenging knitting. I love a good challenge like the next person. I just want my challenge to feel rewarding, not like a hostage negotiation. If a project makes me feel like I need to clear my calendar and spiritually prepare, it's probably not the right project for me. And then there were the eyeballs. And listen, the eyeballs. They're adorable. They're eyeballs. But they're so small that you can't even tell if you're doing them correctly while you're doing them. It's like trying to do embroidery on a grain of rice. And at some point I just had to be honest with myself. The juice is not worth the squeeze. Because right now I have almost an entire frog body and I have one completed eye socket. One. And 2 tiny eyeballs. And I don't want 2 cute little frogs enough to do 3 more of these eye sockets or make 2 more of these eyeballs. And then whatever other tiny details are coming for me down the line. I don't. And I think that there's value in admitting that before I hate knitting for 2 weeks. Or months. However long I decide to keep this on some kind of active burner in my life when I really probably just need to set it aside and walk away. Now, I want to be really clear here because this is not me saying that the pattern is bad. This is not some kind of hit piece on the designer. I'm not saying that. In fact, I think it's probably very well designed for what it is. But I will say this. Patterns at this scale are inherently difficult to write in a way that feels completely certain, or that inspires that sense of confidence and certainty in the knitter. Because so much of it is about tiny spatial relationships and tiny construction moments. And even if there are photos, and in this pattern there are many, sometimes the photos still leave you going, wait, am I seeing this correctly? Am I reading that correctly? Am I doing this correctly? And I don't even think that that's a failure. I think it's the nature of micro knitting construction like this. So I'm not blaming the pattern. I'm not blaming the designer. This is a compatibility issue. It's like an objectively well-written book that just isn't for me. Nothing wrong with the book. It's just not my genre. Now, if you are the kind of knitter who loves tiny details like these eyeballs, who loves an intricate challenge, who gets satisfaction of precision and construction and trust the process energy, you will probably love this. If you have a dedicated little crafting setup like a table and good lighting, maybe a magnifier, maybe the patience of a saint, this is probably going to be delightful for you. And just side note, I know I have a table and I have good lighting. It's just that I don't want to spend all my time knitting in here at this table. I like to talk about knitting here. I like to do my knitting out there. And I genuinely mean that. This would be delightful for that person. But if you are more like me, where knitting is your calm hobby, your couch hobby, your I want to listen to an audiobook and vibe hobby, this pattern might not be your best time. Not because you can't do it, but because you might not want to. And that is a very important difference. And I also want to say this because I know it matters. I know some of you tried this pattern because I was excited about it. And I've actually spoken to a few people who had the same experience where they got to certain parts and were like, oh, nope. And if that's you, I just want to say welcome. We have snacks here. You're not a bad knitter. You're not advanced enough. It's not a moral failing. It's a preference. And I think part of being an experienced maker is knowing when to step away from something that isn't serving you. So what happens next? Right now, Frog is living in timeout with a stitch marker through his eye hole. I may keep him as a little reminder, a little museum exhibit of here lies my ambition. Or I may frog it, pun absolutely intended, and use the yarn for something that gives me more joy. But I'm not continuing. Not today. Not now. Because I would rather put my knitting energy into projects that feel satisfying. Projects where I'm not holding my breath every time I touch the fabric. So if you've been wondering about Frog and Toad, here is the update. The idea was sweet. The start was fun, the reality check was real, and I learned something really valuable. Sometimes the project teaches who you are as a knitter, and then you get to decide whether you want to keep paying tuition for that lesson. And I do not. I'm withdrawing from the semester. No refunds. Now, I want to hear from you if you have ever had a project like this, where you hit a point and you realized, oh, this is not for me. Tell me about it in the comments. Was it lace? Was it tiny toys? Was it stranded color work with 17 colors per row? I want to hear about your absolutely not moment, because I know I'm not alone. And I think this would be a really fun video in the very near future to discuss some of your absolutely not moments. Because I think the more that we learn about other folks' absolutely not moments, the more we feel better about our preferences and the choices that we make. And the more we realize how wise we are as a maker in terms of understanding what's right for us. Thanks for hanging out with me today, guys. If you would like to see more or other bits of extra content, don't forget to check out the Patreon. All links are down below in the description box. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for being here. I will catch you in the next one. Bye.